So here we are, yes, at the end of Hanukkah celebration, 8 days, a celebration of light commemorating the rededication of the Second Temple in the year, by the way, 5155 before the Common Era. And actually it raises a question. How come we don't commemorate in any way the dedication of the first temple at the time of King Solomon? I'll tell you why it's a question, because granted that the reestablishment of Jewish sovereignty in Judea, which was the outcome of the Hasmonean revolt, was a really big deal, because even after the Jews re-entered the land and began building the Second Temple, which was a pretty miserable time actually, not a lot of people came back, and it was a very poor show, and it was filled with strife and difficulty, etc. The Jews came back into the land of Israel after 70 years in the Babylonian exile, and they built the temple, but actually they remained under Hellenistic political control for about 200 years until the event of Hanukkah. And only then, after 270 years after the destruction of the first temple, did they regain sovereignty over the land of Israel. And that's why it's such a big deal. But on the other hand, if you look at the story of the dedication of the first temple, it was actually a much bigger event. It's described in the Book of Kings, a massive 7-day celebration. The Jewish nation had waited not 270 years for that moment, they'd waited over 400 years from the time that they entered the land under Joshua until the moment when Solomon built the temple, waiting to build this temple. And without doubt, the holiness of the first temple, as described in the Talmud, was much greater than that of the second temple, which actually never really made the cut. So here's the question. How come we don't have a Yom Tov to celebrate the celebration of the dedication of the first temple? Okay. Maybe the answer lies in human nature. The first time we do something, when it's new and fresh, we're filled with enthusiasm. We don't need any encouragement to feel excited. But second or third time round, some of the shine kind of like disappears. More energy is required to make it work. So to build something for the first time from new is like a once in a lifetime experience, just like the experience we had building our shul. But then to have to sift through rubble and ruin and desecration and start all over again is really disheartening and very demotivating. So perhaps the sages at the time of Hanukkah, the time of the Hanukkah event, sensed this feeling amongst the Jewish nation of, oh, no, here we go again, after the kind of initial excitement of the victory had died down. The people needed something special, an impetus to lift their hopes. So as the Talmud says, on the following year, on the anniversary of the victory, that is when the sages instituted an 8-day celebration, effectively to re-energize the people, to sustain them in the vision of the future. And that is why when you look at the Haftarah for Shabbat Chanukah that we read last week from the prophet Zechariah, it's filled with stirring visions, return to Zion, spiritual energy, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of the hosts. But when it comes to the first temple, it's a standalone. You only need to read the graphic narrative as described in the Bible to be moved by the significance of the moment. You don't need to have a special event to commemorate it. And that might be the reason. And that is why it seems to me that to this day, we celebrate Hanukkah, although there's no celebration for the inauguration of the first temple. Because from the time that the second temple was destroyed, for now over 2,000 years, we have been in spiritual exile. And nevertheless, 3 times a day in the Amidah, we continue to pray for the return to Zion, the rebuilding of the temple, and the coming of Mashiach. It's there in the Amidah. And I tell you, it's inevitable that a kind of sense of weariness sets in. A kind of feeling like, well, if it hasn't happened until now, and I can't see it happening in the immediate future, so why am I saying these words? And we continue to recite them with a kind of like a formulistic hope, without any enthusiasm, without any real belief. So here we are in a kind of similar situation to the Jews at the time of the rededication of the temple and the Second Temple, kind of feeling a little bit hopeless. And then in the middle of winter gloom, Hanukkah arrives with its uplifting message of rededication, not just of a physical building, but of the whole edifice of Judaism, the whole sense of light, bringing light to the world, the whole reason why we're here, what is the importance of our mission. Hope is rekindled in the lights of the menorah, and that's why we continue to celebrate it. I wonder if this same message applies actually in another context as well. You know, lots of people have noted that they find this second restrictive period much more difficult than the first lockdown. I don't know how you feel, but a number of people have said that. You know, we coped the first time round because it was new. And we were finding our feet in a changed world. So somehow, you know, there was the energy to get on with it and to take care of ourselves, to do the things that needed to be done. Second time round, it's old hat. I don't know about you, but I feel frustrated with the limitations and just plain tired of the whole business. The novelty is no longer there. Yes, of course, there is the bright light of the one day soon to receive vaccine, which brings a certain amount of hope. But as you see from all of our reading in the news and television, by all accounts, that hope is not sufficient to stop people from breaching the rules. You know, it's a proven phenomenon that runners in a race slow down, not speed up, when they approach the finishing ribbon. In order to be able to run fast when you get to the end, you're trained to see the ribbon about 20 feet beyond where it actually is, just so you can keep running. And that's the problem that we face. So for us and for millions of citizens, this is the moment when the end of the race is hopefully in sight. This is the time, the critical time, to strengthen our commitment to beating the virus with the minimum of further infections and, God forbid, deaths as well. And I just want to say that, you know, Christmas Day, Christmas may not be our Yom Tov, but it's a very, very important family time for millions of people in this country. And we know how lonely it was to celebrate Pesach in lockdown this last spring. So our sympathies are with all of those who will be celebrating Christmas with their families. But I think that the Torah message needs to continue to be heard. Preservation of life takes precedence over all else. I wish you all Shabbat Shalom.